Every business has an ambition. PayPal Open is the platform designed to help you grow into yours. With business loans so you can expand and access to hundreds of millions of PayPal customers worldwide. And your customers can pay all the ways they want with PayPal, Venmo, Pay Later, and all major cards, so you can focus on scaling up. When it's time to get growing, there's one platform for all business. PayPal Open. Grow today at paypalopen.com. Loans subject to approval in available locations.
I thank you very much for tuning in to That Will Nevr Work podcast. We have a prolific person with us today, and she's going to wow us, I can almost guarantee. But what if the version of you that the world was told wasn't enough? And it was also probably the part of the problem. But today, Aneta, she joins me to talk about what it really means to redefine self-worth from the inside out. We'll talk about it more after this.
Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Nevr Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
All right. So, Aneta, we're going to jump right in. As far as your bio, we'll give you an opportunity to talk about it and share your website so they can go off and read it on themselves. But we're going to jump into this topic today. So, Aneta, I have a question. How do you measure your self-worth? Is it by what you do, or is it by who you are trying to become?
That's a really great question. So it has phases, right? I
Mm-hmm.
used to define my self-worth based on how others viewed me until I caught myself running myself into circles and
Mm,
literally going in circle after circle and just not getting anywhere. But now, after some trials and challenges and some challenges that have helped me grow, I view self-worth as, is it worth it to do if it's fulfilling to me? Because if it's not
mm,
fulfilling or adding value to who I want to be and what I want to do, then it doesn't matter. I think a lot of times we get caught up in self-worth on material
mm,
things or
mhm.
the physical appearances. I used to be a hairstylist and I worked at the salon. I worked at the salons, the spas. Everybody cares about their hair, their skin, and their nails and their
Right.
makeup. But nobody was talking about what you're saying to yourself, what kind of conversations you're having with your clients,
Mm,
because I'm telling you, if you ever have been to a salon
mhm,
and you're talking to your stylist or your barber,
mhm.
and then the blow dryers get louder, then the conversation gets louder, and then the conversation just drifts all across the whole salon.
Right.
So it's like, are you saying things with your clients that you're okay with it drifting down? But
Mm,
nobody talks about those things. So I really had to really work on my inner healing and
mhm.
healing that inner child to work on how am I talking to myself, how to regulate my emotions, and how to be able to share that with others.
So I think first of all, I could just imagine trying to speak over all the dryers and, hair dryers and clippers and everything else. Cause that, like you said, that can become very loud. But, what I'm envisioning is, will people want to be that vulnerable in a public place like that? Because it is so loud. And so if you have 15 chairs in there all together between the dryers and everything else, and most of them are filled up, did you want to hear someone talk about, if I'm talking about myself, do I want to hear someone listen to my insecurities? Do I want to hear someone say, hey, I don't feel good today? So sometimes we don't want to let down our hair, so to speak.
It's so interesting because, like, I've had moments where I'm like, oh, like, I don't want to talk about this. And then the second someone touches your hair, you just tell everything. That's just so then the blow dryers get louder and it's okay because then, but it's crazy because it'll eventually trickle down. Like there were times where I worked at a salon and it was really long and
Mhm.
I think there is maybe 15, 20 chairs in between my station and the other end.
Hmm.
And people would come, like the stylist would come up to me. They're like, oh, like, what about this? Or what about that you said? I'm like, how did you hear? And they're like, oh, it just trickled down, you know? So I think it's so important to be aware of the thoughts and
Hmm.
the words that we're saying, not only to ourselves, but the people around us, because I say it as, like, joking, like, "Yeah, it's funny how, like, the words trickle down," but how often is that happening? When you're a kid, you play that game telephone, and it's like you're sitting in a circle, it starts with one clear message, and then it
Hmm.
totally changes as it goes person to person, and that's actually the same thing, so, like, it's your choice. Are you saying things that are helping you and helping others, or are
Hmm.
you saying things that are derailing you and trying to derail others? Because the choice is yours. But that's something that we don't get taught enough at an early
Hmm.
age. So I've really tied my self-worth into who I want to be. Do I want to be a person who builds their life on integrity, strength,
Hmm.
and resilience and faith? Or do I want to be someone who is doesn't have a firm foundation,
Hmm.
someone who talks negative, someone who gossips? I had to let go of the second option and really lean
Hmm.
into the first one.
And I think for some of us, that's grown up in environments where we want to be a little more guarded about the information you give because unfortunately, you feel like someone's going to hate on you, right? You feel like they're going to take your idea especially as an entrepreneur, you think they're going to take your idea and run off with it. Now they making millions of dollars and you still making, 17 cents, something like that, right? So how do we break down that, or what would you suggest to someone to break down those guards, though that fence, to say, hey, you know what? I'm willing to share it regardless of how somebody else responds to it.
You have to be so confident in knowing that what is meant for you will not pass you by. And if something is not for you, then
Hmm.
it's not going to work out. I'm a firm believer that if something works out, it's God's direction. And if it doesn't work out, it's his redirection. I have so many examples on this actually. So when I was younger, I struggled with my hair and my makeup. And then I eventually went to cosmetology school and I learned those things. And when I was in cosmetology school, I was like, wow, like everybody does watches Netflix and they watch a lot of series on Netflix.
Hmm.
Well, what if I created kind of like a Netflix for your hair, like series on how to style your hair, series how to and all of the above that you learn in cosmetology school.
Hmm.
But what if I created like a platform teaching it? And then this is so crazy, but then 2 weeks later, I see advertisement on Instagram, "Netflix for your hair," and I was like, I literally told nobody. But I say that because, like, yeah, it might have been a good idea, but maybe that wasn't my purpose and maybe that wasn't my calling. I'm grateful that someone created that, but if it's truly your calling, no one can take it from you and it can't run away from you. Because if it's your calling, it's your calling.
So in that situation, because now you're saying, hey, you had the idea, someone came up with something that was very, very close, i.e., similar to it, right? So in a situation like that, because sometimes some of us, when we see that, we'll still stop. We may not move forward with that. So how would you talk to someone to get over that type of hump? Because they're like, all right, they did it, but not understanding like my perspective on that same topic will be different from theirs. So how would you talk to someone to say, hey, go ahead and get it done anyway?
You don't have to reinvent the wheel. That is the biggest thing with entrepreneurship is that I think a lot of times if we're so new to it, we think we have to reinvent the wheel.
Hmm.
The reality is if somebody does start an idea that you had, well, why don't you analyze it a little bit and see what people are complaining about and see what you can do to fix it. For example, I dove into so many businesses until I figured out what works for me. I've done drop shipping, I've done Amazon, I've done selling digital products, I've done so many different avenues that I've learned a lot, but the most stable one was finding a problem in your personal life, finding a solution to it, And if there already is a solution to it, think about how you can improve that solution.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really like, what can you do that makes people's lives easier? Because if you're not making other people's lives easier, then they're not going to buy from you and they're not going to support you. So how can you, people buy
Hmm.
results, people don't buy the process. So how can you give people the results by making their life easier?
So, Anita, you said a bunch of different things. So,
So
but because again, my thought is like, hey, you're giving us so many different solutions, but but I think what the challenge is that we overcomplicate things. Where what I'm hearing you say is like, no, let's break it down, right? It's simple. Look into yourself. There's, because what's going to make you happy and change the world, you have to have some type of feeling towards it, right? You have to have some type of emotion to it. But sometimes we don't feel that. We're not catching that. We're not catching the simplicity. We feel like we have to change everybody at the same time and not worry about that one person or two persons that are closest and nearest and dearest to us. So how do we not worry about everybody and just worry about the one person, i.e. keep it simple?
worry about yourself first. Just worry about yourself first. I know it's simple advice, but I remember I was listening to this one podcast and somebody asked her, like, well, how do you have so much more productivity? What are things that help you be more productive? And the person literally said, I just sleep more. Because it's literally in the little daily habits on what you're doing to become the best version of yourself. If you're not sleeping, then yeah, you're probably derailing yourself. If you're not eating properly, if you're not working on your emotional regulation, if you're not being conscious of who you're hanging out with,
Right,
then all of those things play such a big factor. So really work on becoming the best version of yourself and think about what struggles and challenges that you have in your life that you can help make others' lives easier.
right,
That's truly like the attitude. Because if you see somebody who starts an online business and they say, "Oh, I made $3,000 my first day," or "I made $3,000 my first month," not trying to be a negative person, but if it's not built on hard work, faith, determination,
mm,
and some sleepless nights, it's not going to be as stable because you need a firm foundation. It's like
mm,
building a house. What kind of house do you want? Do you want one that is quick, that is on like self doubt? It's made really fast. Imagine having a house built in 1 month by a couple people. That's
right,
probably not very stable
right,
versus one that's built on faith, hard work, determination, and motivation. That is what it is. Success doesn't change over the years. Business ideas change over the years, but success principles never change. Are you willing to be consistent? Are you willing to solve other people's problems?
mm-hmm.
Because when you help other people get what they want, you're eventually going to get what you want.
You know, um, going to sleep sound like it's counterproductive, right?
It is.
It sounds like it, but I think there's something that you touched on. Health is wealth, right? And so that's a part of the process. Sometimes you need to rest. Sometimes you need to walk away from that situation because it could cause you more stress, anxiety, whatever it is. But again, it's just the simple things. It doesn't work for everybody. Don't get me wrong. It's not for everybody, but that's still something that's simple and it's every human being. All of us need to go to sleep at some point in time, right? So I think that's something that again, you keep providing us these simple tasks to do to get over the hump. And that's why I'm just like, Anita, like, wow. Like I will be honest with you. Because sometimes we keep overcomplicating these tasks and overthinking them, if you will.
It doesn't have to be rocket science. I was always told that when I was a kid, we've all heard our teachers say it's not rocket science when they're trying to teach us a subject. But to some of us, it did feel like rocket science. To me,
Right.
math did feel like rocket science. I'm just telling you right now. But, but at the end of the day, when you truly break down what it is that you want, the habits are simple.
hmm
What's hard is, are you willing to keep going when no one's clapping? Are you willing to keep going when nobody's appraising you or seeing what you're doing?
hmm
Because think about it this way, you plant a seed, you put it in the dirt. The seed starts to sprout underground in the dark.
hmm
That's like your isolation phase. It's when you're working on yourself. You're choose being mindful of what you're allowing in your brain and in your environment. When you're ready to bloom, and then
hmm
flower is going to come up and bloom in public.
hmm
Imagine a caterpillar. You see a caterpillar, like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then he eventually comes out of that cocoon, out of the isolation phase. What do people say? Oh, that's such a pretty butterfly. I want to go get that butterfly. Wow, the butterfly.
Right.
Nobody was praising the cocoon phase.
hmm
So if you're in your cocoon phase, you're in a beautiful place because there's not a lot of outside noise that can try to derail you. You know, like you're never going to be given anything you can't handle. The
Mm.
guy, like, literally, this is probably like a goofy example, but it's so true. Years and years and years ago,
hmm
you went to concerts, you went to festivals. There's construction workers working outside. Where do you go to the bathroom? No
Mm.
idea.
hmm
But then somebody created a porta potty, and you think
Right.
that person didn't get made fun of? That person probably got made fun of a lot. He wasn't trying to be number one in the number two business. He was just trying
Right.
to create something to help other people. So
Right.
when he helped people with a solution, he eventually got what he wants. Fulfillment is seeing other people living more simpler lives.
Right. Eh, Now, you said something. Sometimes when we look at the flower, we see the magnificence of that, right? We see the beauty of what a flower can become, right? Even if it is a rose and it has thorns in it, it might, so we might see some rough spots here and there, but you still have the width of a rose. You see the beauty of it, different colors, things like that. But there's something that you stated, which is how much work was done in the dark, right? But because of social media, we don't get to see the dark side. We only see the light. And so how do you overcome that idea of, hey, I want to be like that person because that's what they see. I see the outcome and not the income being what I had to put into it.
Reading about successful people's stories and what it everyone loves the brand Dior. I think Christian Dior started his brand until he was 55 years. I think because of social media, we get caught up in our heads like, I'm 21 and I'm not making $1 million online. Like, what the heck? But the reality is that start studying other people's success stories.
Mm-hmm.
What old were they? Because your 20s are your big trial period. Failing. You're not failing if you're falling flat on your face. You're falling forward. So it just means first attempt in learning. That's it. So if you're not failing, you're not learning. And if you're not learning, then you're not growing. And if you're not growing, then you're dying because you're never staying stagnant. You're either growing or you're dying. And if you're not failing, then you're not growing.
So how do I not, because some of us don't want to deal with the pain, right? We don't want to deal with the embarrassment. And maybe that's the reason why I don't want to move forward because I had as a kid and I'm trying to run away from the pain. So how do I embrace the pain, especially in a place where I don't really want to experience it again?
Understand. I was there once upon a time as well myself. I'll give you a quick little background on myself and how I decided to run towards the pain. I stopped running away from the pain. When I was 20 years old, I started dating, and then I was 21, and then we got married, and I was 23. We ended up getting divorced, and then I kept running away from the pain. I was running away from the pain from the hurt in the relationship to the point where I was drinking, I was smoking, I was doing everything I could to numb out the pain. And then I started to get myself back together. I got back into the salon
Mhm.
and I started working at the salon. So I get fired from the salon 8 months later. And I decided that I was going to book a one-way ticket to Mexico. And I did. And I just said I was going to start a new life. I said, I'm done running away from the pain. And was in Mexico, I realized my pain was my purpose. There's
Mm.
purpose in your pain if you isolate yourself from people, places, and things that can trigger you for a period of time and understand what it is. Because the more that I talked about my story of the situations in my marriage, people would come to me and say, wow, I'm going through the same thing. But
Mhm.
they would never say that if you don't run towards your pain. I had to accept this is what happened.
Mhm.
It already happened. It's in the past. All I have is the present moment, and I'm going to accept that. And I'm going to use that to help other people struggling in relationships. So it starts with acceptance, accepting what
Mm.
you've been through, accepting that, yes, that person took advantage of me. Yes, that person broke me like shattered glass. And yes, now I have the opportunity to rebuild myself the way that I was always desired to be.
Wow, Anita. Here's the question I have for you. One last one, because for those of us who are in that space that are broken, and it sounds like you worked it out, right? You are constantly working out because it's never finished, right? The work keeps going, right? So if for those individuals that are still working on it, they're trying to figure it out, and they need to talk to somebody, where can they find someone like yourself so they can have that coach or that inspiration, every day, whatever it is? Where can they reach out and talk to you?
So I've actually created my podcast, Nourished Inside Out. It's on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. So other people can have that safe space in a community to say, like, hey, you're not alone. As they can relate with people because I interview people, all types of backgrounds who have stories of overcoming challenges and finding their purpose with it. And then on Instagram or TikTok at Aneta Waclaw and on Substack, if you're familiar, I do a lot of writing on there at Nourished Inside Out.
Nice, nice, nice. So one last question, my would you rather question that I ask
Yeah.
all of my guests. So would you rather choose three doors or a fork in the road? Now, here's the caveat to that. Use your imagination. There is no
Three
box.
doors and a fork
Yes. So which one would it be? Three doors or a fork in the road?
in the road.
And why a fork in the road?
Because you can see the challenge, so it gives you the opportunity to create a solution.
Can you repeat that again? You went out.
I said I would rather choose a fork in the road because I can visibly see the fork in the road and it gives me the opportunity to create a solution to help someone else along the way.
Nice, nice. See, look at you. You always trying to help somebody out. Need it like but I appreciate you coming on the show today.
It's been an absolute honor. Thank you so much, Maurice.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And y'all, thank you very much for listening to That Will Never Work podcast. Of course, all Anita's stuff will be in the show notes. So her podcast, her social media links will all be there. And I thank y'all very much for listening, and I will talk to y'all just a little bit later.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chism on social media to stay connected and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?
Every business has an ambition. PayPal Open is the platform designed to help you grow into yours. With business loans so you can expand and access to hundreds of millions of PayPal customers worldwide. And your customers can pay all the ways they want with PayPal, Venmo, Pay Later, and all major cards, so you can focus on scaling up. When it's time to get growing, there's one platform for all business. PayPal Open. Grow today at paypalopen.com. Loans subject to approval in available locations.